Hi there, this is Solitaire Ronan from Solitaire Ronan Films, and welcome to another episode of Double Take. Today I continue my unofficial Mikhail Kalatozov season with his two silent films that he made in 1930. Kalatozov had a fairly long career with fairly long breaks in between periods. So this is Salt for Svantenia, and Nail in the Boot. And these are just slightly over an hour long each. They were made, the second one, Nail in the Boot, was made by the Shock Workers Bridge of Georgia. And Nail in the Boot, the government didn't like, so basically Kalatozov didn't make films for 7 years. This is a film museum DVD release, and this is a German label, and they have numbered spines, 1984. They're kind of like second run. They are fairly rare and expensive. They do have a lovely booklet, even though this edition isn't actually that expensive, so I would recommend you get onto eBay and pick these up. Salt for I'm probably going to pronounce it about 12 different times. Salt for Svantenia is another absolute stunner. Kalatozov also I've just recently kind of discovered, much to my eternal shame. But blimey, his films are jaw-droppingly good from a visual standpoint. And then Nail in the Boot is the first Kalatozov film that I haven't given 5 stars. I've only given it a 4. Even though, again, some of the visual imagery is absolutely stunning. These two are not necessarily narrative films. Nail in the Boot is a little bit more narrative driven than Salt. I will now refer to it as Salt, so I don't have to attempt to butcher the name 23 times. So that's a kind of almost documentary film about this tribe of people on the outskirts of Russia, away from everybody geographically, and they have these big towers that kind of protect their land, and they do things a little bit differently there. So they give each other strange haircuts, and there's lots of scenes that are just, as with other Kalatozov films, just stunningly shot. And the composition of the films, they're both in 4:3, and that somehow lends it an even better kind of painted by light frame. There's a wonderful scene of donkeys being led across a bridge. There's wonderful cow and goat action as they're licking the sweat from people because they run out of salt, and some members of the community go over mountains to find salt. It's actually, some of the scenes in the film almost prefigure Letter Never Sent, which was the first Kalatozov film that I saw, which just blew me away and is truly a masterpiece. There's lots of wonderful shots of people in the distance walking up impossible mountains against the sun. Shots of climbing and weaving, and a woman giving breast milk to the earth. There's a funeral thrown in. So it's just all these little snapshots of these people and their behaviour away from, quote, civilization. But it's another absolute belter. There's some filmmakers that are not compositionally amazing, and it's more about the character and the stories. So I mean, Scorsese, John Huston, John Sayles, Sidney Lumet, for example. You wouldn't really say they have, or their films have, an amazing kind of compositional eye as far as framing. But then you also have Orson Welles and Kubrick and Kurosawa and Sergio Leone, and Kalatozov is certainly in that camp of just a great compositional eye. Because some of them, some of the shots in Salt will literally have you drooling as if you desperately need salt. It's just, some of the shots are just outrageous. They're just outrageously beautiful. A lot of silent films, the camera is fairly stiff, whereas these two, Kalatozov, especially Nail in the Boot, which is more kind of story driven, the camera is very dynamic. There's lots of really nice cutting, dissolves. You have to kind of remind yourself that these films were 1930. They're not as stagey as some silent films of the same era as well. You could say, oh well, especially in Salt, it's just a bunch of pretty pictures put together. But it is more than that. The pictures tell the story, because again, if film itself is the juxtaposition of images to create a story or to create a feeling, an atmosphere, these two Kalatozov silent films are just wonderful. Again, Nail in the Boot isn't as fantastic as the other 4 5-star films that I've watched so far. I do have one more to watch. But Nail in the Boot is more narrative driven, as I say. This is from the idea of, for want of a nail in a boot, the soldier was lost for want of the blah 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 blah. You know how the saying goes. So it's basically because of a nail in the boot of military boots. Yeah, nail in the boot would be in a military boot, not a military sandal. There's a chain of events that end up with an armoured car being lost. And Kalatozov, I'm sure, was making the film about how everybody has to work together for the common goal. But of course the government watched the film and took it as a criticism of the Red Army and the criticism of how things can go wrong. There is a bit more kind of German expressionist acting, if you know what I mean, in Nail in the Boot. But again, there's, I've talked before about, pausing Kurosawa films, printing that image and sticking it up in an art gallery. Kalatozov has that in spades as well, and there's some shots in Nail in the Boot that will just make your eyes water. There's a scene with barbed wire and what looks like soldiers, the little cans that they eat out of, all hung on barbed wire. It's just absolutely beautiful and horrible at the same time. So Nail in the Boot definitely has much more of a narrative drive to it. But Salt is just another jaw dropper. It starts off a little bit dry. It starts with a quote from Lennon, not John Lennon, by the way. But then once Kalatozov gets these images started, it's just, oh my goodness, look at that shot. Oh my goodness, look at that shot. How did he manage to do that? Unbelievable. For basically 62 minutes. And as I say, for nail in the boot, it ended up he didn't make films for 7 years because the government didn't like it. Why don't we just ban governments? How about that instead of banning films? Let's ban governments. Who's with me? Probably not governments. So that's, again, in this film museum release, there's actually in German and then there's a paragraph in English, and the booklet is really good as well, because part of it is in German, but also part of it's in English as well, and you do get images. So I was on the Film Museum website. I'm not going to start collecting them, obviously, but they do have some interesting titles, so that's worth a look. Again, they do kind of have the second run kind of feel. This is number 84, so they do have quite a lot of releases. Again, Salt for Svantenia is another absolute stunner, and Nail in the Boot is excellent as well, but maybe just a little notch, for me anyway, just a little bit of a notch below those 4 5-star films that I've seen by Kalatozov so far. Yeah, certainly a director. As I say, I've got one more to watch, but obviously I'll try and find more of his films, but unfortunately I didn't actually make that many because he kept getting banned from the government for 7 years at a time, and did other things. But he's just one of those directors that just has such an eye for composition, it's ridiculous. A director that even in hour-long films or films that are just a little bit over an hour has more jaw-dropping compositions than some filmmakers make in their entire career. And yes, it's not all about the images, but obviously cinema is a visual medium, and some people just know what a good shot is, and some directors go their whole career without knowing what a good shot is, or where to put the camera, or interesting angles, or again characters in the frame giving away their hierarchy or position within that community, within that frame. So another 2 Kalatozov films that I would highly recommend. Again, this Film Museum release is not hugely expensive, and if you like Letter Never Sent or The Cranes Are Flying or I Am Cuba or Soy Cuba, it's a no-brainer because they are spectacularly good again. So who knows, you might see one more video on Kalatozov in this unofficial Kalatozov, until I see a bad film by him. I'm still going to do videos on him. So thanks very much for watching this episode of Double Take. Please let me know if you've seen Salt or Nail in the Boot and what you think of them, and hopefully you'll join me again for more videos, one of which might be another Kalatozov film. So thanks very much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.